Don't miss the opportunity to see the heartwarming story of Noah Wilson, a courageous janitor who risks everything to protect his boss and friend Oliver Smith. Watch the video to see how Wilson became a true hero by stopping a terrible crime and find out how this gripping story unfolds. Noah Wilson had been working as a janitor at the mall opened by Oliver Smith for 6 months, but he had never experienced such hostility before. "Hey, old man. What are you doing there? You're fired. You're too slow at raking leaves and you clearly don't know how to handle a broom." Ashley Davis' voice, filled with irritation, came from behind. The angry woman was the wife of Oliver Smith, the owner of the mall. Davis was an authoritarian woman who enforced her own rules at the mall and seemed to take pleasure in firing employees on a whim. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm going to clean it up now." The wind brought a lot of leaves, twigs and dust, the old man tried to explain. But it was impossible to stop Davis at this point. She made up some excuse to justify her action. But the truth was, she just didn't like him. Ashley Davis exercised the power of decision regarding the hiring and firing of employees for unknown reasons. She didn't like Noah Wilson and decided to fire him from his job at the mall. Soon after, she hired a younger, more cooperative employee who did her own thing for inexplicable reasons. The businessman's wife felt threatened by Noah's presence and pressed for his immediate dismissal. With sadness, Noah Wilson said, "Well, if that's your decision," as he took off his corporate uniform and handed it over to the new janitor. Although he was bitter about being treated unfairly, Mr. Wilson decided not to complain to the mall owner instead. He started going to the place where he used to work and sat on a bench in the shade of a tree, reading the newspaper and carefully observing everything that was happening around him, even with people rushing back and forth, shopping, or admiring the window displays. The elderly man wasn't interested in them. Since the beginning, the man never appreciated the young wife of the mall owner. He felt in his heart that she was too simple and had nothing more than a superficial glance at people and things around her. Mr. Wilson knew that she had obtained a position of influence through seducing Oliver Smith. Nevertheless, Noah Wilson couldn't help but feel great sadness when he saw that his job at the mall was over. During his amateur surveillance, old Mr. Wilson accidentally witnessed a strange scene. Ashley was talking to a young man behind the mall, and the scene seemed suspicious to him. The stranger exclaimed louder than he should have, "Make him sign the agreement with the Chicago suppliers. It's very important to us," Glenn replied. "I'll do my best. But you understand that this deal will ruin Oliver, right? You have to know that the deal with the Chicago firm is a sham. It doesn't matter to him whether it's $1 million more or less. Business is always risky." It was evident on Ashley's face that she was tormented by the decision she had to make, afraid of being overheard by anyone. She looked around again and saw Noah Wilson standing a few dozen meters away. Looking into the eyes of the old man, Ashley immediately realized that he had heard everything and became afraid that others might have heard as well. "Hey, how are you, sir? Come closer, I need to talk to you," called Ashley softly, but Mr. Wilson responded with dignity. "No, I don't need your money. Just don't do what you planned and everything will be fine." The old man walked away, keeping an eye on them, while the scammers exchanged glances, and the man said, "This old man just sealed his fate. There's a lot of money at stake here. I can risk it all because of some crazy janitor who decided to play Sherlock Holmes." Ashley nodded in agreement, as she hated Mr. Wilson and didn't mind getting revenge on him. On the way home, the elderly caretaker didn't even realize that his life was already hanging by a thread. Mr. Wilson was frantically trying to find a way to warn Noah about the scam his wife and her friend were planning. The worst part for Oliver was the fact that he owned the mall. The man's own wife was involved in this scam, as was that strange man who looked like a criminal. "Oh Noah, how can you be so successful and yet so naive?" thought the old man as he crossed the street. The sound of a car approaching at full speed pulled Mr. Wilson out of his sad thoughts, realizing that the accident could no longer be avoided. The old man instinctively took a defensive position and endured the blow. Noah's mind immediately became hazy and, before he knew it, he plunged into total darkness, losing consciousness. How they deceived me, thought the old man in his last moments of consciousness. The driver of the car slowed down for a moment and, seeing the old man lying on the sidewalk, smiled contentedly. "Well, that's it. I offered you money, old man, but now you go. I don't need it anymore," making sure the man wasn't moving. The stranger turned into an alley that led to the highway, where he could easily dissolve into the heavy traffic. But the killer didn't know that looks can be deceiving, and that Mr. Wilson actually survived. The elderly caretaker remained in a coma for 3 days, before regaining consciousness initially. The old man asked to find Oliver Smith and tell him what had happened. The businessman turned out to be a good man, and immediately responded to Noah Wilson's request by buying fruit and various juices for the old man. He came to Mr. Wilson's room in just a few hours. "Hello, Mr. Wilson, how are you feeling? You wanted to see me," the businessman asked from the door. "Well, Oliver, I'm not feeling too good, as you can see. But more on that later. I have some very important information for you," Noah Wilson said with a shaky voice due to weakness. Oliver Smith raised an eyebrow in surprise and prepared to listen. Mr. Wilson had always been a straightforward person, and therefore he immediately laid out everything he knew, just as it was after the old man's story. Oliver's face changed, while a spark of understanding shone in his eyes. "So that's what it's about." And there I was, wondering why Ashley Davis had been pestering me for days to sign the contract with some unknown firm from Chicago, Oliver exclaimed, unable to contain himself. The old man grimaced but refrained from making further comments. The fact was that he had not yet said the most important thing and was very nervous about it. "I am very grateful to you, sir, but could you tell me, please, why you didn't accept the money? They offered an impressive amount, but instead, you chose to risk your life and ended up in the hospital bed. Why did you do that?" the businessman asked anxiously. Noah Wilson realized that the right moment had come. Ashamed of his own frankness, he looked the businessman in the eyes and said, "I did it because you are my son, Oliver." The businessman looked incredulously at the old man lying in front of him and said, with a trembling voice, "What do you mean I'm your son? That's impossible. I don't have a father. My mother raised me alone. Then I studied economics in New York and took my first steps in business. I only returned to Iowa 10 years later. You must be confused or something." Noah Wilson expected this kind of reaction and continued to smile. "Your mother and I got divorced when you were only 1 year old. We realized we weren't good together because we never agreed on anything. After we separated, I married a woman with a son and lost track of you for many years, and recently, I accidentally found out that you opened a shopping mall on Main Street. So I got the janitor job to be near you. I didn't need the money. I had enough, but I wanted the opportunity to see you every day. Son, that's why I did what I did." The businessman's eyes filled with tears as he realized the old man was telling the truth to God. "I've been living my whole life thinking that my father had died a long time ago. And it turns out that you were so close all this time," Oliver Smith whispered, squeezing the old man's hand. "Forgive me, I should have found you earlier. But I was too ashamed to look you in the eyes. I know I've made mistakes. But I would like to ask you to find it in your heart to accept me into your life. Please give me a chance to be by your side for the time I've left," the old man said, ignoring the tears that were streaming down his face. Of course, Oliver forgave his father, knowing very well that nobody is immune to making mistakes at some point in their lives. He informed Ashley that he was filing for divorce on the same day. And according to the prenuptial agreement, the scam artist wouldn't be receiving a single penny. With the right treatment and care, Noah Wilson had a speedy recovery, while Oliver visited him in the hospital every day. The father and son talked a lot and shared their deeper secrets with each other, looking at the relationship that developed between the successful businessman and the frail old man. The nurses couldn't hold back their tears. They had no doubt that these two men would be all right in the end, and they were right. Noel Wilson was released from the hospital. A month after the accident, he was still limping slightly, but he refused to use a cane, preferring to lean on his son's arm instead. When Mr. Wilson let down in difficult times, Noel Wilson was honoured to accept the position offered by his son, and set to work effortlessly to ensure that his son never knew the bitterness of betrayal, not just from his business associates, but from people as well closer to him. What a story! I hope you enjoyed it. For more stories like this, subscribe to the channel.